So we're going to go over today, one thing, that one of my favorite features of 800XA now is the tab navigation with alarm indication. This came out in 5.1 Feature Pack 3, and I think one item that I found is a lot of people were looking at this as being a major reason to even upgrade when they're coming back from 5.0 or something. So that's one of the items we're going to hit, and I think the next thing we're going to hit after that is aspect filters. So every time I go to a users group, I always kind of question the users, hey, when you right-click, which is kind of a big thing for 800XA, the aspect object menu, what do you see? And everyone goes this long list of things. So Brett and I are going to show you a couple tips about how to do some filters, and also Brett's favorite feature, the submenus. All right, don't joke because Brett doesn't like submenus, but I do. But we're going to show you kind of where to set those up pretty quickly and what the advantage is. Another item we're going to hit on is pre-configured runtime alarm and event filters. Many of you might know about this, but we find there's quite a few use cases for this. This is where I can set up a runtime filter, but we'll talk more in detail about it when we get there. Also, we're going to talk about alarm response. So a few of you on the line are part of some meetings that I have at APW, or now ACW, sorry. And we had a nice effort at one time to kind of gather some suggestions. And actually, the tab navigation and this alarm response was part of that effort. But alarm response is, we'll see where we can get multiple aspects up from an alarm list as a precursor for operators to handle alarms or abnormal situations. And then, finally, a new feature that just came out in 6.03, so you might not even be at that release yet. It's called Tag Information Display. And this is very easy to set up and very useful that I'll show you, where we can kind of like dynamic tooltips or something. Yeah. Most of the configuration we found is in the operator configuration guidelines. I think I put that in some of the next
Yeah, ones. I think it's right there at the bottom where it shows it.
But I'll show you. I think I have them in the other slides as well. Yeah. So the first thing we're going to talk about is tab navigation with alarm indication. So this is there are some default workplaces with this already set up, but the idea is that based on your structure, you can set up this, this workplace, kind of use that structure to have areas and maybe it's children underneath, kind of towards a high-performance operator interface. Yeah. But one thing is, what's nice is it's all based on a structure, and what we're going to do is Brett's going to show you how to kind of the different configurations for that, and we're going to actually add a tab to show how easy it is to modify. And then a possible use case, well, this is obviously a part of a high-performance operator interface and good for an operations philosophy. And it really helps you kind of get right down to the problem. So if you look at abnormal situation management and things like that, the issue is that you want to be able to get to where you can take action right away, and so this really helps you kind of navigate down to where there's a problem. And there's alarm indication on there, so you can see some status information to dive down. Now there's pros and cons for this. There's pre-made ones for level 1, like 1, 2, and 3 screens, I believe, so you'll see that, and we can talk about that when we show it. It is a structured approach, though. It does really is based on your functional structure. So some people say, no, I want it to be a free-for-all, and it doesn't really work that way. So I would say it's a pro and a con that it doesn't kind of adapt to exactly what you need. There are some tricks that you can jump over certain levels. But so some people want to have more of a free-for-all, but this is more based on how your structure is set up. Having said that, you can always create another structure and use that as your driver for this. So there are some ways around that. I would say difficulty level is low to medium, depending on what you're trying to do, how many screens you have, and what you're trying to do. There are some things that I found a little weird with the configuration. You got to know your pane size and the pixel, some of the pixels, I guess the heights and things. So, but that is covered in the manual. But I found you have to kind of, it's a trial and error kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. And so there's some configuration tips. Maybe we'll come back to this after we're done and kind of rehash this.
Right. We'll go over that there in a second.
Okay.
So
Brett.
So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go switch over to a virtual machine, and I'm going to go show you an example of a sorry, I have to switch over to the screen. So what you see now in front of you is a virtual machine with already a pre-launched workplace with some tab navigation here. Right now, I am clicked into this process automation area here on this button, which brings me into this view here. So in here, you can see I have 3 tabs already configured at the root level, and then I have also areas underneath for this area, which can be seen here. Now, you might be saying, well, what's that little blinking light that's on the side? And that's to represent that there's an alarm in that area or in areas below it. So here we can see there's a level 2 alarm in the process area. And then there's a level 3 in the reactor 11 and reactor 12. This just allows for quick navigation and for an operator to quickly see and realize that there's an alarm in an area and use that to help navigate them. Now, something else, if we had a multiple screen monitor and system, we can actually use this to determine which monitor this is clicked on. So say this was a 2 monitor. If I clicked over here to the far left, it would open up in monitor 1, and the far right would open in monitor 2.
Yeah, you'll actually see a little box.
Right. It'll hover and it'll show you. Like in this example here, it shows it's going to just take the whole monitor, but in here it would show it highlighted for a specific area.
And also you notice the alarm indication, so you actually get the priority, and if the other box we have it's configurable.
Right.
But it's out of the box, it's configured for
hidden alarm.
Hidden or shelved, actually.
Yeah.
But I think it gives a hierarchy of the hidden alarm. But if there was just a shelved alarm, actually, it would show an S in there. And so we can show you where that's set up.
Yeah. So what we're going to do first is we're going to come over here. You see that this represents that same area, just like Roy was talking about how it's a structure looking. So here we can see that process area. Then we can see that preheat, reactor 11, reactor 12. What we're going to do right now is we're going to build a new tab in here. And all we'll do is we'll create a new object. It's just a generic object that it gets placed here that helps build our topology for here. So here I'm just going to pick one, and I'll just call it reactor 13, and spelling it doesn't count in demo. And then from here, the first thing we need to have is we need to have a graphic in here for it to work. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy one of our already pre-existing graphics, and I'll place it in this reactor. So by doing that, that'll now when I go off here and come back onto this tab, what'll end up happening is that I'll have a new tab over here. By default, it's not going to show any alarms because I haven't configured that portion yet, but it'll just show me my tab. Next thing we'll do is we're going to add a we're going to add an alarm list, and we'll use a specific naming convention which will allow it to show the alarms for that. I'm sorry, I have to hit the save or this graphic won't come up. And Roy's laptop here is not the fastest laptop. I was just teasing him earlier about the size of his laptop. So now I have a graphic on here. So now if I come off this process automation area and go back to the process automation, we'll see under this process area, now I have a reactor 13. But you'll see that there's no icons here for alarm. So we'll go configure that portion next. So all we have to do to get the alarm in here is that we need to add an alarm and event list. And we need to use a specific naming convention, which is display alarm indication. Space alarm, space indication. And then we just will come here and we'll configure this alarm list. So if you notice, this is the default and all are here. If I go off my process automation area and go back onto it, we'll see now that there's an icon for it to show it. Well, this doesn't really do us much help with it showing all the alarms in the system. So all I'm going to do here is that we have a nice functionality that works really well with tab navigation, which is, hey, just show me the alarms that are referenced to this aspect, which is that graphic in this case.
Yeah. So that's what Brett and I were talking about earlier is when you're doing tab navigation, the whole idea is that you're showing, you want to point the operator to go take action. Mm-hmm. So if you could have a lot of maybe tag objects underneath a parent, but if they're not on the graphic, there won't be any tag there to take action on. So by having this is one of the changes I think back when we introduced tab navigation, we added this feature to point toward a graphic. So that'll make sure that there is a condition to actually take action upon.
So now when I hit apply here, we'll see that alarm list now only has one specific alarm on it, which now if we come back and let me go off here and come back on, that's the easiest way for us to refresh this topology. When we go to my new reactor 13, we'll see that it has one alarm. Right here, we see that we have an alarm on a specific object. And if it went out of alarm, now the icon for it will disappear because there's no longer an alarm in this area. So that's a quick rundown of how to build a new tab in a tab navigation type of layout. But you can see it can be quickly built and developed from here to help your operators navigate your plant.
Okay, now just go back a little bit, just a couple things about the tips and tricks here. So you need to think about your structure a little bit. The more you design it for this, the easier it'll be for the configuration.
Mostly if you have level graphics, you have a higher level display of your plant and you want to have it so it's like it drills down into your plant, it needs to make sense, the navigation of it.
And we talked about the AE list being configured to look at the graphics. And again, it's a little more trial and error. In the manual, I think for most of the things we're going to talk about today is in the operator workplace configuration. I found pretty much everything there. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is aspect filters and aspect category grouping. So one thing is, again, that right mouse click, and we want to do filters along the way. It's really to reduce that aspect list to make it more usable. So again, when it's a long list like that, it's really hard to find things. There's a lot of, if you don't filter it, it's going to find, there's things you don't want an operator to probably access either. Not that they would have access to it, but they're going to see it in the list. So it reduces the noise, and some filters are available already. I think the fewer aspects, the better towards your user role or who's doing it. But the con, as I hear often, it's just one more thing I got to configure, right? But this is a one-time thing, so I think you shouldn't have to do it too much once you get it set up.
And I think it's pretty simple as you put down there for the difficulty as well.
Yeah.
You see the button for 2 seconds, and you have one set up.
Okay, do that, and we'll come back to the tips later and stuff. But I think, I think I put down in the tips maybe a couple places where you change things. So we're going to go back to the demo and probably go to the Plant Explorer, I think.
Yeah, we'll go here to open up the Plant Explorer. Right here.
Yeah. We'll raise it up a little bit.
Yeah, let's bring it up.
So usually in the Plant Explorer, now in demonstrations, I put this also in the operator workplace, but typically you wouldn't have that. But so if you see this filter button, if it's not on your workplace or your application workplace or whatever you use, you can add that to the application bar. And here, when you select that, you basically are setting up various filters. Here's some that are already set up. And here's, for instance, for demo operation, we probably have a little more than your normal operator would have. These are all the different aspect categories that we want them to access. And every time, Brett, what I do is when I add some kind of aspect and it's not on this list, I wonder, I just added it and now it's not available. It's because the filter's set and I didn't add it to the filter.
Right.
It happens almost every time I try to do something. So here you can actually take something. If you don't want them to have access to this, you can remove it and then you won't have it. It'll be in this list, or you can take something and put it back. So, and you can create new ones. You can rename things, you can copy them over, and so forth.
And an important thing there, Roy, is just because when they right-click and it's on that context message doesn't mean we can't make an aspect link on a graphic to make that aspect.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
It just hides us from that right-click so that they only see exactly what they need to see.
Right. So that's where I would set up the filter and kind of configure that for the user. But I guess what you want to do is when you log in, you want that filter to be set, right? So that's where we need to go to the user structure, I believe. And Brett will correct me.
You are 100% right. We don't want to save any changes you make.
I know. So when we go down to the user structure, I have, oh, wow, this guy looks smart. We're going to go to this user. And there's a couple aspects down here.
Oh, no.
I think it's under workplace.
Yeah,
here we go. So there's two here, and one of them is, I believe it's this one is where I set up the default user. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit. and I believe it's the Plant Explorer settings under this. So this is workplace profile values, and in the manual, it went step by step of how to do this. So this was pretty low in the difficulty column, and actually my demo wasn't set. I just set it to do it here. So these are all the list of filters that were created, and I can set up a default for that user of what I want that to come up as. But also, there's one other thing that we can do for the list. So I guess sometimes there's a lot of different categories. So let's say some people configure multiple faceplates, and unfortunately I deal with that in a demo more than anything else. But
I'd say alarm list. You might have an event list, right, an alarm list, and like say a hidden list, list. So when you go there, there's all these, and that fills up that aspect list. So one thing that I like to do, but Brett doesn't like to do, maybe we'll see, is this one I had to add a profiles value aspect and call it workplace settings profile values. But when I did, there's a couple of options here, and one is called group aspect. And what that does is it groups the aspect categories. So the like aspect categories, like all the alarm lists, that will put a submenu under there. So that means that when I go to my operator display, when I come over here and I do a right mouse click, oops, don't call up maybe some of these displays. You'll see now I have an arrow under here, and this is exactly what Brett was talking about. So now I have all of these like categories in this list. So that's just one more way to kind of get that list down to something more manageable to make it not so daunting, I guess. Correct.
So, yeah. And because the ABB has, it could have asset monitors on here. It could have your graphics, your faceplates. All of that is kind of configured under that object. That list gets fairly long. But for an operator, I don't want to see all that.
Now, one other thing is not just for the operator, but for the engineer, there's a good reason to have these filters too, is because say you're working on something, you're just working on graphics, you can make a filter that only shows you the graphic, so when you're navigating around, you don't see all those alarm lists and this and that. Mostly if you're just looking at a bunch of graphics as you're going along. And as an engineer, you can see you can quickly switch from what one you're using or to no filter.
And you can pre-configure one for an application engineer, right, and they really nail that down as well, right? So it's been helping them out too. So that's one thing that I hear often that nobody ever sets up, so I think it'll help everyone if that kind of gets taken care of. So I think we'll go back now. And again, we're going to keep asking questions. We're going to go back through there. We'll try to end it as fast as we can and hit some of those questions. So some of the tips. So again, I put down the profile settings aspect on the user. I put those in this list to where you can control that. And then you have the 800XA operation workplace configuration manual. Again, is where that's set up as well. All right, let's go on to the next thing. Next thing is pre-configured runtime alarm filters. And I found this fairly useful. This is where I can pre-configure some alarm filters. I can always do it on ad hoc to my alarm list. The idea is to do it ahead of time so I can get quick access maybe for alarms. And this can help out engineers as well as operators. So it really helps reduce down the number of alarms so you can focus on something. I've gotten asked by some HMI consultants, hey, my design has this in it, or I want to just see the high priority alarms in case there's a flood condition. How can you do that very quickly and very easily and so forth? And this would be how I would advise them to do it. So very, very easy to set up. Brett's going to show you in a second here. I don't see a con. I don't see why people wouldn't have some of these. And granted, you would like to see your alarm management system so you wouldn't need one, right? You need to do it for an operator, but it can still help the engineer out quite a bit. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in. You just have to know kind of what field and what kind of expression to put on it, which we'll show you here.
So what I did for this example is I created an event list just to start off with that I have all the events of the plant pouring into. So it's an all event list. It's quite daunting because it has so many things in it. But by building a filters, I can filter to just seeing things for, say, services right here from this pull-down list. And I'll show you how that's configured here in a second. And then it will just automatically filter based on that setup. And just pulling quite a lot from Roy's messy system. So here we can see it's all the services. So it would be the same thing as if I went to the service structure and looked at the service event list. Now I can just quickly turn it off by clicking on that filter, and then I'll be back to just a normal event list. Now, if you can see here, I already have a filter running, so I'm going to clear that because I didn't mean to show you that yet. So now we can see we're back to a full list of all the different things. And so we all know that we can just come here and we can right-click and we can build a filter on the fly just by doing control and then say a wildcard to get anything with the name control and any characters behind that. And that's all well and good, but sometimes it's hard to remember that, or you're going to use them quite often, like Roy said, that you would just rather be on a pull down that you can get to them quite quickly. So we'll see here that it should still searching through all those messages.
On my messy system.
On your messy system.
The anticipation is killing me.
I know. And there we can see everything with control networks being listed now. So that's great. How can I now configure these? Well, we already have one configured. They would be configured in the library structure where we do all of our event lists. So in here, I have this all event list configuration, and we'll see on this alarm event list configuration, we have a tab called runtime filters. Here we see that I already have the services one here, and if I just only show what configuration I did, you can see I did it on category, and I said services equals there. But I could easily do this based on different things like, say, an audit list. So instead of remembering all the different things, we can also just copy already started ones, and we can just change the different functionalities we want. So I can hit this, and I can just type in audit. And then I can come here to the expression that I want to change for audit, and just change it to audit. And I can put wildcards in this also, so this way to get the alarm acknowledges, process changes, and all that. I hit apply. So now you'll notice I have two different ones in here, and if I go back to my alarm list, I have now audit, or if I select that, and let me clear my runtime filter before I pick that. Pick audit. That's the reason why I really don't like runtime, the on the fly ones, because you can't remember that you set it very quickly unless you look for that little asterisk. Where these are quick because I can see that I have something filtered because this is indented here, and then we can look here and we can now see all the audit events that have happened in the system. Like you can see here all this. So it can be useful for troubleshooting if you have a list like this. And like Roy says, it can also be great for alarm lists, where we can come here to an alarm list and we can come here and set it so for pressure alarms, temperature alarms, or like he said, high priority alarms, where it would only show us priorities over a certain criteria.
And
like this one's priority 2 and higher.
Yes, anything less than 3.
Right. That's an example of how we can use these runtime filters to help make our alarm and event lists more user-friendly. Now that'll bring us back to
some of the tips. No, I think that was about it. I think it was pretty easy in the runtime filter tab, and you just got to know, again, the field that you want to do in your expression. The next thing is alarm response. So again, a lot of our users got together, and they were always used to something in previous systems they had, right? So Mod 300 had fetch alarm. What was it called in Harmony? Remember? Oh, there was some kind of display. It was like, you know, what calls up from an alarm, basically, you know, so you get the faceplate or unit display or things like that. So the idea was, wow, we have this great aspect object technology here. Why can't we have something even a little better than that? So that was a great idea, and so we got that into the system. And this is where, upon an alarm, by double-clicking, if you have alarm response configured for that object, it will bring up to 4 different aspects of it. You can also access that from graphics and things of that nature. possible use case. Again, just quick access to information. And what I say to people usually is your most experienced operator knows what he likes to go to, right? I need a trend, I need the faceplate, I like to bring up this document, and I like this, this other thing that I bring up to help me solve this problem. Well, if you have a new operator, it might take him a while to learn that. So it'd be nice to say, okay, what does the experienced guy do? Let me kind of embed that in the system so he has the same chance, at least, of seeing all the right information to make the best decision. So if we go through here, and pros and cons, pretty easy to set up for simple things. Could get a little messier if you want to get aspects that are maybe not in the same structure. Another thing, I've had some brain teasers trying to go up the structure and down the structure to go find something else, and some of our advanced users using super types and subtypes to try to make this work. So for simple things, it's pretty easy. For hard things, it's kind of hard. So I put that low to hard because now I do know that tech support, I remember, helped me out a couple of times because they had to solve a couple problems to get aspects. So they definitely can help with the case, or maybe AKS, or some of the forums. Or I have some information. If you get stuck, please call one of us. We can try to nail it down for you. So let's go to the demo so I can show you where those things are. Now I got to clean up Brett's mess. So what we have here is one of the reactors. If you right mouse click on it, oh, look at that alarm list, or that aspect list. Isn't that nice and short with the stuff menus, Brett?
If only we get rid of those groups.
Yeah. So here I can tell it's configured because I have alarm response, and it shows the different ones. Now, what's nice is from the aspect list, I can open all, or I can pick each individual one if I want to. And I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a little bit for now. So I can do that, but really it's meant to come also from the alarm list. So you should see that same list, or if it's configured for that tag, that should be in there. So for instance, in this one, there's not one configured for that particular alarm. But the same thing happens. So if the alarm is in there from that particular object, you can double click it and it will enact whatever you see here. So it will open all basically. So that will bring up, in this case, if there's an FFC on there, a trend, alarm instructions, and the faceplate, then hopefully if you have a larger monitor thing, or you can actually, with view classes set correctly, they would go in a predefined spot so they don't kind of cover up everything.
Right, and you could set it for a full system for alarm response, and if the aspect just doesn't exist on that object, it just won't open.
It won't show.
Right, so that way you can set it and it stays for alarm helping and have a bunch of documents, but you don't have it on all tags. It'll still function correctly for those ones that do, and the ones that don't, nothing will open up.
So let's look at this a little bit. So there's an easy way to configure this, I found, is the configuration console. Has alarm response navigation. You can pick one of the, I'm just going to show you here, maybe in the workplace. Oh, this means it was configured someplace. But you can go in here and pick, I'm trying to think if it's the, no, see, if we
just go to the workplace structure. You'll see that.
Oh, right. But in here, you can pick the simple things, though. You can pick what faceplate, graphic, trend. Those three things.
I can think of a document type.
Yeah. Okay. So you can pick these simple things. And so if that's all you want, you can set it up from the configuration console. And it says in there, basically, well, if you want to do something more than this, then you have to go configure it in the system. Right. So that's why they're not showing up here, because somebody's already configured the special ones for these workplaces.
And like I said before, if that aspect just doesn't appear, it just won't pull it up for that alarm, but no error messages will occur or anything like that.
Right. So we go back to the system. Now, if we go to the workplace structure, if we go to the workplace that we want to look at, and we go, in this case, I'm dealing with this workplace, and there's alarm response settings. Oh, and just do it from here. So here, you kind of have to read the manual a little bit to see how do you set the path and category and things. In this case, we're looking at category. So it's saying, hey, if I find a faceplate, a graphic, a trend SFC or so forth, it's going to pull those up, like Brett said. If they're not there, it just won't pull it up.
Right. And another thing is that even though we set this for the whole workplace, this alarm response, we can go to individual tags and override it and say, so this specific tag, open this extra aspect. So even though we do this as a shotgun blast where we take care of the whole system, we can still go granular on specific tags if necessary. let's get out of the demo.
So let's see what kind of tips we had on this one. So again, simple configuration you can do for the configuration console. More complex, you got to go kind of where I was, and as Brett said, if you need to do something on individual aspects, you can do that. It's also, when you right mouse click, you can see that in the alarm response and get it at any time, even if there's not an alarm, which is kind of useful to see the go-to displays. And again, the configuration was in that same manual that I mentioned before. Now, one of my favorite things, this is brand new for 603, which I know some of you probably aren't even at that release yet, but this is called Tag Information Display. And what this does is kind of like tooltips when you hover over something, but the idea is more and more for graphics, for a high-performance look and feel. The idea is I want to see what's happening, I want to look at trends and other things, but I don't necessarily need to see every single little tag name of everything. So I want to see the process and its kind of format, but one engineer actually said to me, or human factors expert, sometimes open space is just as important as the data on the graphic itself, to make sure people can notice things and have that situation awareness. So with this tag information display, you can basically just do a certain hotkey, like a Control-T or something, which I'll show you how to configure it, and that will bring up for a certain amount of time the information from the tag. So like the tag name is the default, but I can also add the description, I could add the current value, the alarm status, whatever you want to do. And so for use cases, one thing is to clean up that workplace, but as soon as somebody saw this that had to do a graphic validation, they go, oh, this would really help me to make sure that all the tags are in the right spot, right? So I go, oh, I didn't think about that, but yes, that would be a great way to do some validation on graphics after you get an upgrade done. So very easy to set up, and it's a lot easier than probably trying to do some PG2 way to hide everything, which we've done in the past, right? So having some kind of layered approach or something, and then it's kind of hard to see what's not there to edit it and things. So this is a nice way to just have these things kind of come up. So let's go take a look at that. So when I go to my graphic here, blow it up, I'm going to go back to the process area here. So I'm going to do a Control-T. And you see all of the information that came up. So I just got, here I have it configured, and I only have it going on for 5 seconds. So when it comes up, you get the tag name, and I also put the description in. And I did a carriage return. I'll show you how to do that. And I have it in the tips as well. So that's really about it. There's not much more to it. You can, I believe, do a right mouse click also and turn it on and off for the graphic as well.
Yeah, you can. And
so
you can
tag
also
information.
Place with the placement of that block box is all by default placed, but you can move it on individual cases.
Let's go look at the configuration. Yeah, so when you go look at the configuration, you'll see what we're talking about. So unfortunately, I closed it out, but I'm going to call it the configuration menu again, configuration console. It's one thing, if 800K users have been with the system a while, they've been with it before this was available.
Yeah.
I find it very, after a while, I'm like, oh, I should have went back here. And that's where I stumble on things once in a while. So under Appearance and Personalization, under Appearance, there's Tag Information. Again, this is new for 603. So here's all you really need to do. You can enable it. Then you can do the duration, so you can have it for 30 seconds or 5 seconds or what have you. Now here is the content. Out of the box, it just has object name. But here I put this little carriage return /n, and then I put in the object description, and that's why I have the description on the next line down. So, and also here's the tag placement. So this is kind of across the system. So where do you want it to come up? Do you want it the left top, center bottom, and so forth? So you can set one. But the item, if you need to change one, so if one is overlapping something that you don't want, if you edit the graphic, you'll see a tag placement around that element in the graphic. There's a tag placement property, and you just have to change it to whatever you want it to be. So for our purposes, when I put it on here, I go, I can live with that, right? So I can live with that kind of look and feel for it. And that's about it. So I think that's kind of a neat feature. I'll do it again because I just like seeing it pop up.
The animation always gets you.
Yeah. Marketing guys got to see animation. Do we have a? Yep. Go back to the presentation. I don't think there was many tips on that anyways, but you can.
Yeah, we can look at tip is you should turn it on. Yeah,
turn it on.
It works.
Yeah. So if you have to do a lot of if they're overlapping a lot of the elements depending where they are. If you're busy, really busy graphic, depending on how you're using it, that could be an issue. But other than that, again, it seems to be a nice option or nice feature to put in, especially if you're going to try to clean up those graphics a little bit. What do you do? So, like Jeff was saying about, I think it was Jeff anyway, remarking about some of the slow call-ups or some kind of performance things. So what do you do for if a customer is complaining about like slow times or some sluggishness in their operator interface? Because none of this matters if you can't call the display stuff.
So like on all these things, within lifecycle services, we have personnel that are ready and willing to help out with different things. Some of these different things that we showed here, like the 800XA advanced fingerprint and health check. That's a good way to take a snapshot of time of the system, and it can be used as a benchmarking tool to look at how the system's running over time. So that way we can look at it, say the graphic call-up times over a period of time for some specific graphics and use that as a KPI to determine, how the system's performing.
Let me ask you, is this something you want to do kind of as ahead of time? If things are running good,
I would say
then you have a benchmark kind of thing?
Because the key part is that we are able to compare the results over time. So it's not just each fingerprint that don't stand on its own. We use that and able to collaborate them with others.
So these are the X-rays from
making sure that everything's staying well and healthy. And we have other fingerprints then that are just even showing up here, from different things for performance of the process or loops to being able to just come and help if you need help setting up some this graphic stuff. We have the personnel that are.
I know we got projects people that are doing this for customers all the time. That's who I go to talk to a lot. And then there's also you guys, right? You guys do this as well. So again, I think the message is we have some help out there. And guess what? That's it.
And we kept it under an hour.
Guys, thank you very much for attending. We want to keep this up. So also, if I did reach out to you, or if you have my email address, it's roy.tanner@us.abb.com, or respond to Bart here. His information is probably going to come in some post message or something. But so please write us and let us know what you think, if this was valuable, if you will attend more. I know you got short notice, some of you, on this one. I appreciate you showing up. And we'll try to get the word out better. I think Bart had a suggestion about how to make sure it's not going into junk mail before. I know that happens to me all the time. So please let us know what we can do to kind of keep this going. We think it could be a help to everybody. So with that.
I appreciate you guys attending. Thank you.